Insecurity is a tough demon to fight. It can make you feel stuck and run away from opportunities. It's that judgmental whisper you hear in your head around the person you like. But that voice didn't come from you. It exists likely because somebody either told you or showed you who you were was not enough. Just like how Stark's father used to call him a failure, there's a part of you that internalized the labels set on you by someone else. In this video, we will be talking about the effects of insecurity, where it comes from, and how to deal with it through the character of Stark from Frieren Beyond the Journey's End. If I were to ask you to describe Stark in one word, what would you say? You'd probably come up with words like fearful, courageous, kind, or lovable according to Fern. Her words, not mine. But what about the village he grew up in? How would we describe that? Let's talk about it together. Stark is the second son of a chief from a village of warriors. He was born at a time where threats of demons and monster attacks were rampant, and there was no room for the weak. Stark says so himself. The village valued grace, stoicism, and perfection, exactly the embodiment of Stark's older brother. The village chief, their father, believed that fighting perfectly, getting out of a fight without any injuries or a speck of dirt on your clothes, is the pinnacle of strength. Showing you're not afraid of anything is strength. I'm sure you already know where I'm going with this. I want you to look at these two pictures. Notice anything different? That's right. The village Stark grew up in fought with swords, while Stark now fights with an axe. I may be looking too much into this, but if we compare fighting styles with an axe versus a sword, we can see the incompatibility Stark had with that village. He's not someone who fights perfectly. He's the type of fighter who may keep falling down in the dirt and may not look graceful, but he is resilient enough to be the last person standing. Because his father didn't see the value in his strengths, he labeled Stark as a failure. Our minds are much more malleable as children. Our sense of self has not developed yet, and we look at others around us to help form our sense of identity. It is when we are most prone to internalizing external expectations, which can cause our insecurity. I'll let Dr. K, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, explain more about this.
So when does it hit my self-esteem is when I internalize that criticism, when I internalize that expectation, when I translate from my parents who say that you have to get a 4.0 to be a good kid, to be a smart kid, when I internalize that expectation and I say smart kids are kids that have 4.0s, good kids are kids that have 4.0s.
Because Stark's father treated him as a failure during his childhood, he struggled to form a strong sense of self-worth. Combined with the trauma of fleeing his village, Stark had fully internalized the belief that he was a failure. Before we look at the effects of insecurity to Stark now, let's actually specify what he's insecure about. Stark is insecure about his strength, both physically and mentally. He's afraid that once the situation gets dangerous, he would abandon the ones he cared about, just like he did before with his village. He doesn't believe that he will be heroic enough like his brother or Himmel the hero. Now let's talk about how his insecurity had affected his life. When Frieren and Fern met him, he was staying at a village under the threat of being attacked by a dragon. We soon learned that Stark had already tried confronting the dragon 3 years ago. However, during the standoff between him and the dragon, Stark found himself paralyzed with fear. That is until the dragon, for an odd reason, stopped attacking the village and flew off into the distance. Upon seeing this, the villagers started seeing Stark as a hero, and he couldn't bear to leave the villagers behind with the threat of the dragon coming back to attack. Stark didn't want to repeat the same mistakes he did in the past. He didn't want to be a failure again. Stark was stuck in a hard place. He had developed a sense of responsibility for the villagers who treated him well, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be strong enough to defeat the dragon and defend the village. So he chose the safest option of all: stay in the village and stall for as long as he could. He never neglected his daily training to prepare himself for the fight, but until the dragon attacks, until someone comes in to break this standstill, he was going to keep things as they were. Just like if you never shoot your shot at someone you're interested in. You may do your research and follow all of the advice you see online, but if you never actually tell that person you like them, if you never confront that dragon, nothing will happen. Maybe that was a bad analogy, but you get my point. So how exactly do we deal with insecurity? Let's take another look at what Dr. K says and apply that to what Frieren does.
Unfortunate as it is, like sometimes the easiest way to get self-esteem is from other people. It's actually cultivate people who, treat you for who you are. And as you hang out with people, don't push them away because it may feel super awkward. But then you can start to learn through mirroring of others, because remember, that's how we originally develop attachment and security and stuff like that, and that your self-esteem can improve.
Stark had never been verbally praised by anyone before meeting Fern and Frieren. Not only that, his father didn't hold back from calling him a failure. It wouldn't be surprising to think he would develop an insecurity about his strength. Through Fern and Frieren's constant verbal appraisal of Stark's efforts, we can see Stark able to slowly manage his insecurity. Side note, I appreciate that Stark was defensive towards Fern's praise for him at first, but as their relationship grew closer, he became less defensive to her compliment. Before we move on, let's go back to this dialogue from episode 9.
じゃなければもっと良かったけど。このくらい戦士なら普通だぜ。普通ってなんだろう。
Aizen's definition of a warrior is different from Stark's home village. He was the one who taught Stark that winning simply means you're the last person standing regardless of how you look after. Stark now associates being beaten up and looking ragged after a fight as something natural for a warrior. Because of Aizen's influence, he's not pressured to fight perfectly anymore. The anime also helped build his confidence by recontextualizing what Aizen and his older brother saw of him. In episode 12, during Stark's birthday, Frieren makes him a big hamburger steak similar to what his older brother and master would make for him on his birthday. Stark didn't think anything special of this until Frieren tells him that in his master's culture, making the hamburger steak for someone means they recognize that person as a warrior who works hard. Stark then realizes that despite not giving him verbal praise, both his master and older brother acknowledged the effort he put in to get stronger, that they cared about him more than he thought they did, and that on the day his home village was attacked by demons, his brother didn't tell him to run away because he thought he was useless in the fight, but because he cared about him and wanted him to survive. After this realization, we see Stark better able to face his fears. Ironically, his next battle didn't occur in the battlefield, but in a confrontation with Fern. In episode 14, Fern was upset at Stark because he did not have any gifts prepared for her birthday. The conflict resulted in Stark storming out of the room in tears. Just like before, his first instinct was to run away from confrontation. After he storms out, Stark has the time to think for himself. Fern approaches him as he stares into Himmel's statue, seemingly looking for courage. With trembling hands, he apologizes to Fern first and explains the reason why he didn't get her a birthday gift. He wanted to choose one with her, but he didn't want her to think he was just making an excuse. This time, he didn't need someone to talk him into facing the conflict. He may have ran away at first, but he still took the initiative to share his thoughts with Fern first, to do something that scares him. And lucky enough for him, Fern was understanding of his reason. I am well aware that not all of us are lucky enough to have healthy, loving people in our lives. Frieren presents us with another way to manage our insecurity that can help in such situations. Keep showing up for yourself, trust in your dedication, and find your resolve. Back in episode 6, when Stark expresses his fear of fighting the dragon, Fern responds by saying, "Your training won't betray you." Because Stark showed up to train every day, his body is able to remember how to fight, even if his mind won't. All he needed was a strong reason to face the dragon, and he had one. He wanted to protect the villagers. Back to the analogy of liking someone. Let's say you're insecure about how you look. You don't want to tell that person you like them because you're afraid they'll think you're not attractive enough. For that specific person, that might indeed be the case. However, if you keep showing up for yourself, if you keep improving yourself and living a life that you want to share with someone, you'll be able to find a person you like who also likes you back eventually. Ask yourself why you want a partner in the first place. Is your reason strong enough for you to keep showing up to achieve the outcome you want in spite of your insecurities? Insecurity happens when we've internalized our failure to reach external expectation. It is incredibly important to understand that we are good enough regardless of any labels or measuring sticks society or our family puts on us. Through Stark, we are able to see the negative effects of enforcing external expectations on children. We also see the positive effects of emotionally supportive relationships and how genuine appreciation of the effort he was putting in, regardless of the outcome, slowly helped Stark gain confidence in his own abilities. We realize that just because we feel insecure, just because we fear something, doesn't mean it has to control our lives. How would you deal with your own insecurity? I'll see you next time.